Before we dive in, if you're ready for a story darker than the Mississippi at midnight, hit subscribe, drop a like, and let me know in the comments how deep you think this case really goes. Now, let's step inside Angola. The sun had barely risen when the call came in. A guard from Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola, reported something that sent a chill through every investigator who heard it. A prisoner had vanished during the night, but not escaped, vanished, as if swallowed by the 18,000-acre prison grounds that once served as a slave plantation. Angola wasn't the kind of place where people disappeared quietly. It was a fortress of razor wire, searchlights, and routine. Every movement was counted, logged, watched. And yet that morning, a bed lay cold and untouched in cell block R, and one of the prison's longest-serving inmates, a man named Ellis Redbone Carter, was nowhere to be found. Detective Mara Lavo arrived before the warden even stepped out of his truck. She was sharp, methodical, and feared by anyone who had something to hide. Angola's front gates loomed like a reminder of every failure she had ever carried, but she had no time for ghosts. Not today. The warden, John Merritt, met her with a face drained of color. He didn't escape, he said before she could ask. There's no sign he left the grounds. No tunnels, no breaches, nothing. Then he's still here, Mara said. That's what scares me. Angola was a place with history soaked into its soil, stories of brutality, corruption, and men who entered but never came out the same. For decades, journalists and advocates had whispered about hidden abuses, secret punishments, and a culture where silence kept the machine running. But a man vanishing inside the largest prison in America? That was something different. Redbone Carter wasn't just any inmate. He had been locked up for 23 years, serving a life sentence for a murder he always insisted he didn't commit. He was tough, respected, and most importantly, quiet, a man who avoided trouble. So why would he suddenly disappear? Mara followed the guard tower logs, the cell checks, the security footage. Everything pointed to the same impossible truth. He had been in his cell at lights out and gone by sunrise. The deeper she dug, the stranger things became. A guard admitted he had heard something around 2 a.m., a sound like metal scraping across concrete. Another guard reported seeing shadows moving near the old livestock barn that hadn't been used in years. But the most unsettling clue came from an inmate who worked in the field line. He pulled Mara aside, whispering nervously. Redbone was scared. Said someone found out about what he knew. Said the past ain't buried at Angola. It's rotting just beneath. What did he mean? She pressed. He said there were things buried here that were never supposed to be found. By midday, Mara had enough thread to see that this disappearance wasn't random. It wasn't even new. She requested access to Angola's historical archives, files rarely seen, some sealed by past administrations. The room was dusty, dim, filled with decades of secrets, old reports, inmate complaints, staff misconduct cases that were never processed. She combed through stacks until she found something that made her pulse hammer. 3 other inmates, all housed in the same block as Redbone, had disappeared in past decades. Their cases were labeled confirmed escapes, yet every report looked rushed, inconsistent, and suspiciously identical. No evidence of a breakout. No confirmed sightings after. Just gone. She stepped outside for air, staring across the massive fields where prisoners once harvested cotton under armed watch. Angola's quiet felt wrong. Heavy, as if the land itself was holding its breath. That's when the radio crackled. Detective Lavo, you need to get to the old barn. We found something. When Mara arrived, officers stood in a tight circle around a locked storage door, rusted and chained for decades. One guard's hand shook as he held out a key they had recovered from behind a loose board. This wasn't supposed to be here, he whispered. Mara inserted the key. The chain fell loose. The hinges groaned, and as the door slowly opened, a wave of cold, stale air drifted out, carrying the unmistakable smell of earth and something long hidden. Inside, something waited, something that shouldn't have been there. When the flashlight beams finally landed on the ground, several officers gasped, because lying in the dirt was something that didn't just answer one question. It raised 100 more. A boot, a prison-issued boot, and beside it, human bones, buried shallow, recently disturbed, and not just one set, several. Mara's voice was barely a whisper. Redbone didn't escape. He found something. And then her light caught something else, a fresh footprint leading deeper into the barn shadows. Someone had been there that morning. Someone who might still be nearby. Someone who didn't want the past uncovered. The deputy sealed off the barn, but Mara wasn't ready to step away. The footprint in the dirt was still fresh, crisp around the edges, and deeper on the heel. Someone had been standing right there, watching, listening, maybe even waiting for a chance to erase what Redbone Carter had stumbled onto. Angola had always been a place full of secrets, but this was different. These remains weren't old. They hadn't been buried decades ago. The soil was still damp, still loose. Someone had been using this barn recently as a graveyard, and Redbone? Mara was no longer certain he was dead. Not yet, but he was in the middle of something dangerous. She moved her flashlight along the walls. Scratches. Not random. Deliberate. Prisoner numbers etched into the wood. 5 codes. 5 men who had escaped over the years. All their numbers were here, carved in identical handwriting. Someone tracked them, she murmured. Someone kept score. Deputy Hernandez stepped inside. Detective, Warden Merritt wants you back at administration, says there's something you need to see. Mara followed him up the slope toward the warden's office. The sky above Angola was a dull gray, and the entire compound seemed to buzz with an energy she hadn't felt earlier. Fear. Guards were whispering. Inmates pressed against the bars, eyes tracking every movement. Rumors spread faster than wildfire in a place like this. Inside the office, Warden Merritt stood stiffly behind his desk, holding a folder. This was mailed here yesterday, he said. Addressed to the warden's office, but with no name. No return address. Postmarked from Baton Rouge. Mara opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Redbone Carter, standing somewhere on the prison grounds, staring into the camera with an expression that wasn't fear, but warning. Behind him was the old barn, and in the corner of the photograph, barely visible, was a second silhouette. A guard. Where did you get this? Mara asked. It was in the mailroom inbox this morning. Merritt replied. I don't know who sent it, but clearly someone knew this was coming. Do you recognize the guard in the picture? Merritt hesitated. I'm not sure. Mara raised an eyebrow. Not sure or not willing to say. The warden stiffened. Detective, Angola has nearly 2,000 employees. We aren't as tight-knit as people think. She didn't press, but she didn't believe him. As she left the office, a low alarm began echoing across the yard, the unmistakable siren for a lockdown. Guards scrambled. Inmates were ordered to their cells. Doors slammed. Lights flickered on across multiple towers. Then radio static burst to life. Unit 5 to Central. We got a disturbance near the old infirmary. Officer down. Repeat, officer down. Mara sprinted to her car and tore across the compound. The infirmary was one of the oldest buildings on the grounds, a long-shuttered medical wing used before modern facilities were built. Now it stood mostly empty, used for storage and occasional overflow. 2 guards were crouched beside the officer who had made the call. His arm was bleeding, cut by a shard of broken glass. What happened? Mara demanded. The injured guard swallowed hard. Someone ran inside the infirmary. Didn't see who. They were fast. Broke the window to get in. Mara looked at the broken pane. Only one person on these grounds had a reason to run toward the dark corners of Angola. Redbone. She drew her flashlight and stepped through the window frame. The air inside was cold and thick with dust. Hallways stretched into darkness. Old patient rooms, collapsed ceilings, peeling paint. She moved slowly, listening. A faint sound echoed from deep in the building. Footsteps, but uneven. Someone walking with a limp. Redbone, she called softly. If you're in here, I'm not your enemy. Silence. Then a whisper. Not words. Breath. Close. Too close. Mara swung her light upward. On the ceiling beam above her was a message written in charcoal. They are burying the wrong man. Her pulse spiked. Someone else was here. Someone haunting this building like a ghost. Suddenly, a door slammed somewhere down the hallway. Mara dashed toward the noise, rounding a corner. and stopping dead. Another photograph lay on the floor. Fresh, glossy. It showed the same barn and the same guard silhouette. But this time, there was a new detail. A glove, a patch, a badge number. Mara's breath caught. She knew that badge number. It belonged to a senior officer, a man who had been at Angola for 27 years, a man trusted by every administration. Captain Raymond Holt, the captain who trained half the guards on duty, the captain who oversaw Cell Block R, where Redbone Carter had lived for 2 decades, and the captain who, that very morning, had called out sick. The photograph had a handwritten note across the bottom. Find him before I do. But Mara wasn't sure who the I was, or which one of them she should fear more. The rain started just after sunset, rolling over Angola in heavy sheets that blurred the towers and turned the yard into dark rivers of mud. The storm made the prison feel smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were closing in. For Detective Mara Lavo, the timing wasn't coincidence. Someone was moving under cover of darkness, and Captain Raymond Holt, missing since dawn, was at the center of it. Back at the command post, officers scrambled across maps and radios, trying to locate Holt, but Mara wasn't convinced he'd run. No, men like Holt didn't run. They cleaned, they covered, they made problems disappear, just like the men buried in the barn. Mara studied the second photograph again. The badge number, the silhouette, the handwriting. Whoever sent these images wasn't exposing the truth. They were forcing her to find a deeper one. She headed toward Cell Block R Holt's domain. The storm hammered against the metal roof, echoing through the dim hallways. Most inmates were locked down, but quiet voices whispered through the bars. One prisoner called out, "Detective, you looking for Holt?" Mara stopped. "What do you know?" The inmate leaned forward, eyes shadowed. Holt's been running things in the dark for years. Punishments, transfers, people ending up in places they shouldn't be. He paused, but this time he messed with the wrong man. Redbone. No, the inmate lowered his voice. Before Redbone, years before. Mara felt a cold weight in her stomach. Who? The inmate shook his head. Ask Redbone, if it's still alive. She didn't have time for riddles. Every minute that passed made the search colder. She stepped out onto the walkway, scanning the yard again. That's when she saw it. A light flickering in the warden's old farmhouse. The building had been closed for decades, structurally unsafe, overgrown, forgotten. But now, a single warm glow burned behind one of the windows. Someone was inside. Mara radioed it in, but static swallowed her message. The storm had crippled the comms. She was on her own. She moved quickly through the rain, slipping across the muddy path toward the farmhouse. The door hung cracked on its hinges. The scent of damp wood and decay filled the hallway. Her flashlight cut across the peeling wallpaper, past broken furniture, toward the back room where the light glowed faintly. She approached the door and pushed it open. A lantern sat on a table. Next to it, Redbone Carter. Alive. Barely. He sat slumped in a chair, wrists bloody from restraint, breathing shallow and weak. His eyes opened when he heard her step inside. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered. Mara knelt beside him. "Who did this to you?" "Holt." Redbone looked toward the dark corner of the room. "Not Holt. He just followed orders." "Whose orders?" Slow footsteps echoed behind her. Mara turned sharply. Warden John Merritt stepped out of the shadows. But it wasn't the calm, worried administrator she'd seen earlier. His face was cold. Blank. A man who had stopped pretending. "You weren't supposed to find him yet," Merritt said quietly. "You weren't supposed to find any of it." Mara positioned herself between him and Redbone. "You ran this? The disappearances? The burials?" Merritt's eyes flickered. "When you run a place like Angola, you learn that some men don't rehabilitate. Some men destroy everything they touch. So we dealt with them." "You murdered inmates." "I removed threats," he corrected. "Prisoners who attacked staff, who organized riots, who brought violence into a system already overflowing with it. And Holt helped you." "Holt was loyal," Merritt said. "Still is." A door creaked behind Mara. Captain Holt stepped into the lantern's glow, his expression unreadable. his hand clenched around a restraint strap still stained with Redbone's blood. Mara's heart hammered. 2 men, 1 exit, and Redbone fading fast. "What did Redbone do?" she asked. Merritt gave a humorless smile. "He found the graves, and he told someone outside these walls." "You?" Mara whispered to Redbone. Redbone shook his head weakly. "Not me. Someone else, someone watching." Mara froze. The photographs. Someone else was pulling threads she didn't even see. The door behind Merritt burst open. A guard stepped inside, gun raised, badge visible. It was Officer Jalen Brooks, one of the youngest men on staff. "Put your hands up," he shouted at the warden. "Step away from her." Merritt's face twisted in fury. "You little—" "Don't," Brooks warned. Mara seized the moment. She grabbed Redbone, dragging him toward the opposite door. Holt lunged. Brooks fired, hitting Holt in the shoulder. The captain collapsed, groaning in pain. Merritt bolted through the side exit into the storm. Mara followed, stumbling through rain and mud until she cornered him near the livestock pens. Lightning lit the sky, framing the warden in stark white. "It didn't have to go this way," Merritt hissed. "Yes," Mara said, voice steady. "It did." He reached into his jacket. She braced. But he didn't pull a weapon. He pulled a flash drive and smiled. "You think I acted alone?" Before she could react, he hurled the drive into the rising floodwater. It vanished instantly. Merritt laughed. "You can bury me, detective, but you'll never uncover the rest." Rain swallowed his words as officers swarmed in behind her, forcing him to the ground. 3 months later, Angola was under federal investigation. Merritt and Holt faced charges. More bodies were uncovered. More secrets surfaced. But the flash drive, the one piece that could reveal everything, was never found. And then, in early spring, a new envelope arrived at Mara's office. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, a fresh grave, and a shadow standing beside it. The handwriting on the back sent a chill through her spine. The story isn't finished. A final message below it. If you think Angola was dark, you're not ready for what comes next. Subscribe.